Hollywood is in mourning. Robert Redford, one of the industry's true pillars, has completed an astonishing life at 89. On September 16, 2025, in the stillness of his Utah home, he drew a final quiet breath. The loss hits hard for his family and for the generations who grew up with him. For more than 6 decades, he wasn't merely a marquee name. He lifted the art form itself. He won an Academy Award with Ordinary People. He built Sundance into a refuge for storytellers, and he wrote a chapter in world culture that will not fade. Audiences treasured his performances, his rare elegance, and the wistful tug of a bygone era he seemed to carry with him. Yet beyond the bright glow was a man acquainted with pain, the death of his first son, other searing losses, and wounds time never fully healed. He met them with composure, turning private grief into work that reached millions. This doesn't feel like an ordinary farewell. It feels like watching a monument come down, a steady flame dim. A voice that once challenged injustice and murmured honestly about love, loss, and resilience fall silent. Consider this a simple salute to a legend, someone who gave so much that the quiet he leaves behind sounds louder than fame. To most of us, Redford gleamed like classic Hollywood gold. But at the start, he was a boy confined to a narrow bed fighting polio, learning fear and grit long before a camera lens ever found him. Born on August 18, 1936, in Santa Monica, to Charles and Martha, he grew up an only child in Van Nuys, modest means with the Depression's shadow still stretching over working families. Around 1946, about 10 years old, he remembered the sting of disinfectant, blankets that felt heavy as stone, and the panic of willing a limb to move that refused. "I thought I might never walk again," he recalled, "but my mother refused to let me give up." Night after night, Martha massaged stiff legs and whispered hope, teaching him that resilience often looks like quiet persistence, not noise. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, the future Sundance Kid first had to wrangle his own restlessness. Angry, drifting, he slipped toward a rough crowd in Los Angeles. Reckless nights, risks he barely understood. A police stop ended with a stern warning, not cuffs, and a father's steady hand pulled him from an edge that could have changed everything. He found better outlets, sketchbooks crowded with imagined lives, the open sky, and the steady rhythm of sport. On the court, he proved he belonged. He even warmed up. Pancho Gonzalez at the Los Angeles Tennis Club won, bright spark suggesting he might fit somewhere. Beyond the city's forgotten corners, then came a blow that never stopped echoing. In 1955, just 18, his mother, the person who had worked life back into paralyzed legs, went in for surgery and didn't return. Infection took her. Charles never remarried. The house turned hollow. "It left me with a silence I could never fill," Redford said later. That silence walked beside him into adulthood and, yes, into fame. The mid-1950s brought Whiplash, a sports scholarship to the University of Colorado. He felt 20 feet tall, then heavy drinking cost him that chance. Packing up early became a stone in his pocket. Rather than surrender, he chose distance and discovery. France, Spain, Italy in his early 20s, painting, walking, living lean, until the inner noise softened. "Resilience is rarely loud," he'd say later. "It's moving forward even when fear has every argument in its favor." Back in New York in his mid-20s, he carried discipline, a faith in art, and a promise to answer any returning shadows with work. He studied painting at Pratt Institute, then enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. Acting wasn't fireworks. It was a grind. At 24, he scraped by with TV bits, The Twilight Zone, Maverick, Perry Mason, work that barely paid rent but proved he hadn't quit. Ironically, the face that would enthrall millions was his first barrier. Casting directors saw the golden hair and symmetry and tagged him too pretty. "It can be a gilded cage. You're inside, but no one thinks you belong," he said. He needed a role that let the real man step forward. It arrived in 1963 Broadway. Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park, opposite Elizabeth Ashley. At 27, Redford finally displayed the wit, timing, and quiet vulnerability critics had missed. The play was a sensation. For him, it was freedom. For the first time, they saw me, not just what I looked like, films followed. Small parts, then era-defining leads. The easy danger of the Sundance Kid in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The playful intelligence of Johnny Hooker in The Sting. The dogged reporter Bob Woodward in All the President's Men. The aching romance opposite Barbara Streisand in The Way We Were. Still, Too Pretty lingered like a heckler. When The Great Gatsby didn't catch fire, it stung. He didn't retreat. He pushed into urgency, All the President's Men and beyond. Cinema has a duty to mirror reality, however uncomfortable, he said, and accepted the solitude that conviction can bring. Then he leapt behind the camera. Industry whispers insisted a handsome leading man couldn't truly direct. On Ordinary People, he walked a tightrope beneath 1,000 doubting eyes and delivered a film so humane and piercing it won him the Academy Award for Best Director. That statue wasn't vanity. It was vindication. His impulse to open doors for others became Sundance. In 1981, on Utah ground, he planted a fragile idea, a true home for independent voices. People scoffed. Money was scarce. He kept going. Sundance grew into a sanctuary where unpolished but necessary stories could finally be heard. His private life began before the spotlights. In 1958, at 22, he married Lola Van Wagenen, steady, bright, generous. They started with borrowed furniture, stretched dollars, and low-lit promises. For a man who had known illness and uncertainty, those early years were a revelation. Then the unthinkable. Their firstborn, Scott, lived only a few weeks. The nursery went silent. "You never heal from something like that," he said. "You just learn to live around it." Hope returned with James, Jaime. But even that glow flickered. Born prematurely, he spent childhood between hospital rooms, enduring endless treatments and 2 liver transplants. By day, Redford wore the armor of control on set. By night, he sat in sterile light, holding a small hand and making promises he feared he couldn't keep. It was like living under skies that never cleared, he admitted. The storm broke in 2020. After remarkable resilience, Jaime died of cancer of the bile ducts at 58. Decades after losing Scott, the universe reopened the same wound. Lola stood with him through it all. Their marriage lasted 27 years, from 1958 to 1985, spanning anonymity, worldwide fame, distance, rumor, and grief. No scandal closed that chapter. Simply 2 lifelines slowly drifting apart. He never spoke bitterly of her. He called her the great love of his life, the partner who steadied him before anyone cared and carried burdens no audience ever saw. Those private knocks didn't sit off to the side of his career. They shaped it. His work resonated because it was forged in contradiction, joy and sorrow, victory and loss. He carried grace on screen because he needed it off screen. After the marriage, he didn't tumble through tabloid headlines. He moved carefully. There were real connections, brief, imperfect, meaningful. He stayed open, if guarded, keenly aware that love can both save and shatter. Some friendships cut deeper than fame. Natalie Wood, his co-star in Inside Daisy Clover and This Property is Condemned, blended steel and tenderness when he was still proving himself on camera. Her sudden death at 43 in 1981 devastated him. Paul Newman, his partner in Butch Cassidy and The Sting, became a brother. Racing, pranks, confidences shared without a word. When Newman died of lung cancer in 2008 at 83, Redford said simply, "There's a hole in my life now." Then, in the late 1990s, the edges softened. He met Sibylle Sachars, a German-born artist whose world was measured in color, movement, and patience. Where Hollywood demanded noise, she offered quiet. They married in 2009. "It feels like a new life," he said. Together they made The Way of the Rain, a live piece marrying her imagery with his voice, honoring the earth's fragile beauty. It was less performance than devotion. In his final years, his steps slowed and his voice gentled, but his mind stayed clear, rooted to the land and to Sibylle. On September 16, 2025, under the wide Utah sky he loved, he exhaled one last time. The world called it the end of an era. For Sibylle and for his children, Shauna, Amy, and Dylan, and his grandchildren, the center of their world fell away. They mourn not an icon, but a husband, father, and grandfather, the steady heart behind the legend. Tributes rushed in. Directors, actors, presidents, fans. In Utah, grief stayed private. A scarf with his scent, a half-finished sketch, a chair by the window that will never hold him again. The house echoed with him and without him. His legacy goes far beyond film reels. Sundance, born in 1981 and tended like a living garden, remains his great gift to storytellers. He worried commerce might swallow its soul, so he guarded the flame to the end. At his passing, estimates put his earthly wealth near $200 million, earned from acting, directing, producing, and careful stewardship of his Utah home, tied to Sundance. He never flaunted it. What mattered was balance, art, nature, family. Even as health challenges mounted, sketches, environmental efforts, and story ideas still waited on his desk. He left with work glowing inside him, the true mark of an artist. This story endures because it's human, not spotless. He faced what could break anyone. 2 sons lost in different decades, friends like Natalie Wood and Paul Newman gone too soon, a marriage worn by time and distance. He didn't surrender.